All right, folks, here's the deal. This week's episode, it's a lot more political than what we normally get up to here on this My Bourbon Podcast. So, if it's not for you, you can go ahead and skip it. I don't care. I love this episode. It was a really great conversation with Chuck from Appodlachia. It veers into some topics of conversation that might make people a little bit more uncomfortable when talking about politics in general. So if you are not interested in that, it's okay. You can move on to next week's episode. Logan from The Bond is going to be back on. We're going to be catching up. He's going to be on for pretty much everything, even into the Patreon stuff. So you can listen to next week's episode. Don't worry about it. I love this episode though. You might learn a thing or two about me. You might learn a thing or two about how I view the world. But at the end of the day, this is My Bourbon Podcast. This is probably as political as it's ever going to get on this show. But at the end of the day, I love you. I thank you so much for all the support you've ever given to the show, to TIMBP. And I hope to see you real soon. Until then, though, enjoy episode 396 of This Is My Bourbon Podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to This Is My Bourbon Podcast. I am your host, Perry, and with me this week is a very special guest, kind of a guest co-host for the show this week. He is the host of Appodlachia. His name is Chuck Corra. I am so excited to have him on the show. I was talking with a friend earlier and saying, Chuck, that you're kind of a dream guest on the show. I'll be very honest with you.
Thank you. I'm very flattered.
How are you doing, first of all? How's your day been?
It's been all right. No complaints. It's been rainy here in Chattanooga, so a little depressing weather, but I can't complain. We've just been busy with life stuff, and as the world burns, you know.
Yeah. Now you are a new resident of Chattanooga.
Yes.
As of fairly recently.
Yeah.
But my I have some connection to Chattanooga, oddly enough. My dad went to Baylor School down there. He was
Baylor School. Interesting.
Yeah. He was a boarding school resident during high school.
Oh, okay. Cool.
He's, from Kentucky, of course, but he made a conscious decision when he was in high school to go down there. And so Chattanooga holds a fairly significant place in our hearts in the Ritter family. So when you said you had moved there, I was like, that's such a wonderful little place.
Yeah, I really like it so far. I haven't had a chance to really, I think, fully embrace being here just because I've been so busy since we moved. But yeah, it's a really nice area, and I'm looking forward to getting to know more about it and meeting people and just experiencing all that it has. Because we used to live in Nashville for about 5 years back, I was more like 4 years for me, 5 for my wife, like from 2015 to 2020. And we go down to Chattanooga a lot. We really liked it. So I was excited to be back.
Yeah. And you've lived all over the place, but you are originally from West Virginia, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Originally from West Virginia. My wife and I have just been indecisive about where we want to live. I think we finally are landing on Chattanooga, but lived from West Virginia, lived in Michigan for a while, Tennessee, Nashville, Virginia, Florida, and back in Tennessee, hopefully for at least the foreseeable future.
Good deal, man. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. I sent you some samples of bourbon.
You did. Thank you.
Drink along with. Yeah, of course. We're going to start off with a normal segment on the show called Flying Blind, where since I lost my most recent co-host, I had to switch things up, but we're going to revert to the typical way that we would do Flying Blind, which is blinding the other person on the side of the podcast with a pour. And so you've got one with 3 question marks on it.
I do.
That guy right there. And with my terrible handwriting. So I'm going to have you go ahead and pour as much as you want of that. You don't have to, finish all 2 ounces of that sample.
Yeah, I think because I'm still on the work day here, so I'm only I actually didn't bring a cup, so I'm just gonna go straight from the bottle. So that's how we're gonna do this for now.
Go for it.
But yeah, I'm interested to try this. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Cheers then.
Cheers, man.
Ooh.
My favorite thing here too is, Appodlachia is not necessarily a whiskey podcast by any means. So when it comes to your experience with bourbon and whiskey, I'm taking somebody who, could have next to no experience, and taking their feet to the fire, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've definitely tried bourbon before for sure. And I don't drink as much as I used to,
sure,
just in general. But I remember my first, I don't know if this is considered bourbon. I know it's whiskey, but my first whiskey was in 2009. I was a freshman in college, and someone had brought Knob Creek to a vice presidential debate watch party, because that's how much of a loser I was. And I tried that, and I was like, God damn, what is this? And that was my first experience with hard liquor.
There you go. Yeah,
I was a good kid. I didn't drink in high school.
I didn't either. It really was not until I was 20 or 21 that I started drinking too. But you got a 9-year-old 100 proof bourbon that you're starting off with Knob Creek. That'll get you going, man.
This one is good, whatever it is.
Yeah,
and it had like really smooth aftertaste. I liked it.
So this is a fairly well-known, well-regarded bourbon. I wanted to get you off on the right foot at the very least. A lot of people know this as the horsey bottle, and lots of folks spend a lot of time hunting for it, or at least used to. It's made at Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky, and is Blanton's single barrel.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Okay,
yeah, it is supposed to be a high rye bourbon, according to their mash bill, which is their recipe for their whiskey. This was dumped on June 11th, 2024, which was my 8th wedding anniversary. So wanted to
nice.
Share
Congrats.
something. Thank you. Share something special with you as well. It's 93 proof, and roughly about 5 years. The ages are not confirmed on Blanton's anymore. But it used to be around 6 to 8, just depending on the barrel itself. But that's where we're starting. So
I like it.
We're moving in all sorts of directions here.
That's a good way to start.
Yeah, man. So one thing I like to ask people to get things kicked off as well, and you might not even have an answer for this question because, as you said, you don't drink as much these days. But, Chuck, what have you been drinking recently?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And it doesn't have to be bourbon either.
Fair enough. I'm a Diet Coke addict, so that is one thing. But yeah, I don't drink as much alcohol nowadays. I drink a lot more like THC seltzers. That's what I've been really into lately. Great Kentucky company, Cornbread Hemp, has seltzers now that are THC seltzers. They're very good. And there's like a local place in Chattanooga called the Plant Bar that sells pretty much nothing but like THC, like CBD infused seltzers. So I've been really into that lately because it kind of takes the edge off of a long day. And also ones with CBD and it helped me sleep a little bit better. So I've been really into those.
I've been considering doing an episode on THC seltzers. So that's something in my purview. And if they're worth pursuing, I think I'm gonna have to make that leap here.
I think because I think less people are drinking alcohol these days, and I think it's a good alternative for people who don't want to have like a negative side effects of alcohol, but still want to like kind of take the edge off. So I've liked it for that, and it's been something like in the past like 6 or so months I've been really into, even though some states have been cracking down on them for whatever reason.
Is it because there might be? I don't know. There might be more than THC in them. I don't know.
I think it's just because like there's still states where they're really backwards on anything related to cannabis, weed, whatever you want to call it. And I think that I'm not really sure. Like I've been trying to follow my buddy Jim Higdon on this, but it's mostly just like states that they just have backwards views on THC and they think like, oh, this is going to get in the hands of kids. And it's like, well, alcohol, you don't seem to have a problem with that. So, I think that's exactly. And I think there's just there's like these old decrepit lawmakers that just don't have, an understanding of how THC works and how refined the process is with this, because there's a lot of companies that very professionalized and how they grow the plants, because a lot of them do, or well, not a lot, but there's at least like several that do organic growing, especially in Kentucky. There's a couple companies that do. I'm trying not to say Cornbread Hemp because they are technically a sponsor of my show, and I'm not trying to pimp them out. I swear to God, but they are a Kentucky-based company. But there's some like them as well. They're very professional about it. They are way above board and have been doing it ever since 2018 when it was legalized in the Farm Bill. And so, I mean, I think there's just a lot of people that still see it as like the devil's grass kind of thing and are just ignorant about how it's really not that bad.
Well, and this just as well as anybody too, especially in Kentucky, we're starting to make advancements towards, it not being seen as such a taboo product as well. I mean, despite how many people may view the 2024 election results, there were some good progressive outcomes in Kentucky. One of which was, some vast improvements in medical marijuana, statewide, which was incredible. But kind of blew me away that happened, despite the fact that, it was a very red outcome in the state.
Yeah. I mean, and there's like Florida, for example, they've passed several progressive ballot initiatives like that. But yeah, I mean, I think once there are more ways of consuming THC products, it becomes less taboo. Because I think a lot of what people don't like about it is just like, oh, it's like smoking a joint kind of thing, and that's really not appealing to a lot. And I mean, I look, I don't like smoking things in general. I've never been a fan of it, but now that you can just put something like that in a drink that you can buy at a nice bar in a gentrified neighborhood, then I mean, it becomes more appealing, especially to like wine moms and stuff who are like, maybe I don't want to do any wine anymore, but I still want to take the edge off. Exactly. So I think, because I mean, that's what like most older people I've been coming into contact with have been against it. They're like, oh, I just don't like it, these stoner culture type thing. And look, there's plenty of head shops that don't do themselves any favors of how they design their businesses.
Well, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
it is part of the culture, but I think that, the more educated people are on it, the better it has a chance of actually surviving, once it gets to,
Hmm.
the ballot itself. But we've danced around it enough, but I want to give you the opportunity to actually introduce yourself and talk not just about who you are, but talk about Appodlachia as well, and your love for Appalachian culture and what drove you to create the podcast itself.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And thanks for having me on the show, by the way. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
of course, man. Of course.
So I mean, I started the show in December 2019 with my friend John, who was co-host for a couple stints there for a while. And he's no longer because he's a public defender, and it's kind of hard to do his job and have time to do the podcast. But still a good friend of the show, obviously. We started it because he had run for office in 2018 in West Virginia, in a deep red part of West Virginia, and we realized there wasn't a lot of people talking about the issues that we cared about, particularly like progressive issues. And at that time, that was before a big podcast boom from the pandemic. So it was still a relatively novel thing to be doing, so to speak. And we started it that way. And it kind of just, we did it at, I think, a time that was really helpful in 2019 because, like I said, there wasn't a lot out there. Like we weren't in lockdown yet. So people weren't, getting bored and starting their own podcasts. And so we caught a little bit of a momentum from there. And it has just evolved a lot. Like I still do the podcast. It's a part of the whole apparatus, but a lot of what I've tried to do is build a large social media presence too, because I think that's how you reach a lot of people. And I think that it's important when people think about Appalachia, they see it as a more complex place than just what is typically portrayed in the media and pop culture is like this red, backwards, inbred hillbilly dominion. And I mean, there certainly is some of that, and I'm not trying to whitewash some of the problems the region has, but I think it's a lot more complicated than that. And I live there now. I had like at the time I started the show, I was the Appalachian expat, someone who moved out of the region, which is common among people. And now that I'm back in the region, it takes on a different form. And so right now I've been doing the podcast as kind of like an interview based format show and building a social media presence that I'm trying to grow pretty aggressively lately. Just because I think that the more people that I can reach and show that there are progressive leftist people in Appalachia, I think the more important that story becomes. And so that's what I've been trying to do with it. And it's been really fun. I've really enjoyed it because I think that I've gotten to be connected to so many people that I otherwise would never have met in my life and never really have been able to, have a reason to talk to these people or have a reason to connect with them. And I think that it's just always really gratifying to hear from people who are glad that we exist because they have like-minded views of the world, and they've always just struggled with their Appalachian identity because it always has been associated with backwards thinking and whatnot. So I like to try to do my little part to change that narrative.
This kind of leads into something. One of the things that I wanted to do in a lead up to this. I don't even really want to call it an interview because there's so much of a conversational part of this episode that I wanted to have with you. But one thing I really wanted to engage with was asking friends of mine who are fans of what you do to give me questions to ask you. And one of my friends, who's actually was my high school psych teacher, her name's Jamie, is a massive fan of the podcast, and she grew up in a small town in Kentucky, in Appalachia. And when I was talking to her about the framing of this episode, we were talking about kind of like advocacy for Appalachian people and the region as a whole. she specifically said, as she was like racking her brain about increasing advocacy for the region outside of the region, and in the way that like people care about, national parks because they have a relationship and an attachment to those areas, having like visited them on family vacations and whatnot. How do we create that same cultural investment in Appalachia to people with no connection or attachment to the region? Because like and she specifically calls out like Tyler Childers, because he's doing so much to like represent the stories and the voice of Appalachia, but we can't, put the entire burden on his shoulders. So how do we kind of mimic that and share those stories do we have to open like an Appalachian restaurant in New York City where it's serving soup, beans, and cornbread, or is there more to it than that?
I mean, that's a great question. And Tyler Childers has done a lot for his home, for the region, and continues to do so. Yeah. I mean, his footprint is left on, or I guess thumbprint, whatever you want to call it, is left on so many different things that, I mean, I think a lot of people don't even realize. But I think that people who are from there have to, use a platform they have to tell a different story than what people are used to hearing. And I think like that's part of what Tyler does and just how he lives his life and what he does and the values he lives by. And I don't know that he set out to do that or not. I don't know him, but I think the way that he lives is evidence of that. And to show that like, you can have a progressive worldview and be a mega alt country Americana music star,
Right.
And I think that like it would be great if we had like 1,000 people like him, but I think that even one thing I've noticed is that there is like a different perception about Appalachia because of things like TikTok, where people are sharing, this is where I'm actually from and this is what we're actually about. And I think that that's good. And so I think the more that we can do things like that, the better off we are, and show that like we exist here and that Appalachia as a culture is like probably not what you're like aware of or what you've seen before, that how it's portrayed and like more popular culture, national media type thing. And I think that that's been good. And that's part of the reason why I started the show and why I've been trying to build the platform bigger, because I'm hoping to reach more people to show them that like, our history is more complex. Like, for example, Bernie Sanders just last week or the week before went down to Mingo County, West Virginia, a place that is extremely small. My sister used to be a Spanish teacher down there. They have like one road that goes through most of the county. Yeah. And if a coal truck tips over, then you're not going to get to school that day. And he went down there and did a couple of rallies and went to the Mine Wars Museum. And the Mine Wars Museum is doing an incredibly important job of educating people on like why West Virginia was such an important part of the labor revolution in this country and why it's one of the reasons we have unions today. And I think that the more that we can show people what the true story of Appalachia is, its complexities and all, and who the people are that are trying to change that about it, the better off we are. We have so many, like you mentioned Tyler Childers, we have so many people in the music space right now that are from Appalachia that are proud to call themselves Appalachians now. And I don't think that was the case 5-10 years ago. Like one of my favorite people, her name is Addie Levy, and I had her on my show a few months ago, who is a mandolin player for the Brothers Comatose, which is a really great. I don't know what they would call like they call themselves like party grass, just like a bluegrass, like upbeat kind of genre. Grass. Yeah, I think they came up with the term party grass for themselves, but like it's hard to describe them. But they're a really, really incredible band. And she's just like, I'm proud to be an Appalachian mandolin player, and like that's who she is, and that's how she presents herself. And I think that's incredible. And like Sierra Farrell, another incredible, like one of my favorite artists of all time from West Virginia, who is showing, and like she doesn't quite wear it on her sleeve in the way that some other artists do, but it's obvious that's where she's from, and she's she tells that as part of her story. I think the more people that we can encourage to do that, the better we are. And I think we're seeing that more. I was talking to another person I met from the show who I've actually become pretty good friends with. like genuinely. Her name is Emily Calandrelli, and she's known as the Space Gal online. And she is among many other things, including the 100th woman to ever go to space. She's like the host of these like science television shows, like Exploration Outer Space, and she co-hosted a show with Bill Nye. And she's from West Virginia, and she always is telling people that, because when she grew up, her whole thing was like, the only people we could point to that were like West Virginians were like, your Jennifer Gardners of the world, and which is not a bad thing. I love Jennifer Gardner.
Well, sure, yeah.
And I will sing her praises till the cows come home. But there is only a handful of people, and they're mega famous. But now that social media is a thing, you can get to know all these other people that are from the region. And Emily's one of the best examples of any time she has the opportunity to mention where she's from, she does that. She went to space last year and used that as an opportunity to raise money for a West Virginia based foster care organization. And I actually helped her identify that organization. She had reached out to me and asked, like, I want to try to find a West Virginia based organization that focuses on children that I can help raise money for with this, and use the publicity from this to raise money for it. And so I think people like that are the people that we should look to and support their work. And also, find like the smaller people too. I think that's a roundabout way of answering that question, but I think it's incumbent upon the people that are from there to help, like, to tell their story, to have other people help tell their story, and to show that there's not one single story that defines Appalachia, and we can bring that culture to other people. The last thing I would say is, like, with getting people to visit the region in similar ways to like national parks, I think that there's a lot of people who are doing kind of interesting things with that. One of the things that brought a lot of tourism to the region, to West Virginia specifically, was Fallout 76, the massively multiplayer online game from one of the greatest video game franchises of all time, in my opinion. And which in their entire game is based around Appalachia. It was actually really cool playing it and seeing like all these places that I had grown up seeing, like Camden Park and stuff like that. Right. And so, and that's inspired a lot of like, people to come and visit these places in West Virginia. And I think that people who are like Appalachian, like that's their personality on social media, have also been doing that. And I think it's really good. And I think just like mentioning Fallout 76 and cryptid stuff in general, there's so many different events that are based around folklore that reel people in. Like Mothman is a huge thing now somehow. I don't know why it's blown up so much, but it's kind of introduced people to a different part of our state's history and an interesting folklore. And I think that's been another good entry point for people. So I think it's both supporting the people that are already trying to tell that story, but also telling your own and showing people that, that our region is different. It's complicated, but it's also got really incredible people from it.
I think if anything can be memed to death, they're going to run with it. And Mothman is just, ripe for memeing. And
for sure.
they were able to take that and run with it. But I think what is so important about what you're talking about too is, elevating people, and whether they're considered small people or not, is up for debate. But it's crucial to just helping folks to realize that there are stories worth telling from the ground up, and no matter, and it's, I think that there's this level of erasure that happens at times when it comes to recognizing Appalachian people, as opposed to, and there we can talk about, whether Appalachia is more recognized as, a culture or a region, just, geographically, or, the people themselves, because in this day and age, it's hard, I think, to really define it. anymore, because there is really no one way to pinpoint that, especially because, it's been usurped by so many different forms of culture. And, if we hyper focus on, say, like the music side of things, well, that can be commodified into, the newgrass, right? Bluegrass into newgrass, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but there are aspects of it where it's like, could it be argued that you're losing some of the heritage behind it? But then is it, just saying, well, it's the natural progression. And, you go down these pathways of, does this mean that the people who were a part of the original stories that were told, are they still as important to, the culture in the region? And, you think about mining culture and, mining families that, that was the backbone of their cities, their towns. And with that being something that has truly, gone to corporations now, and it's not even really recognized. And for, it is in and of itself an inherently very unsafe industry, and that's outside of this. But when you look at how this was such a well-defined culture in and of itself, those people in so many ways have been left behind. It feels like, and so it gets to this larger point of, like, when we talk about advocacy, we also have to, kind of focus from the ground up on visibility, right? And, encouraging people, as you're talking about, to, like, wear that on their sleeves, speaking about being, Appalachian as their heritage, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, rambling a bit, I apologize. But let's, as we continue, let's move on to the next sample.
All right.
We'll go with the Henry McKenna next. This is another single barrel. This has a barrel date of August 7th, 2012.
All right.
This is a 10-year-old bourbon, at least 10 years old, I think. Could have been 11 by the time it was dumped. This is made by Heaven Hill in Bardstown, Kentucky.
Okay.
And this was a bottle that I opened for my 30th birthday in
Nice.
in 2023. So yet another bottle that I wanted to share with you.
I love it. It smells really good.
Yeah. Here's the.
I wish I had I have whiskey snifters, but I think they're packed away somewhere, or else I would be using those. But yeah, we're just
It's all good, man. I like
raw dog it.
I like the juxtaposition of me drinking out of the glass and you out of the the sample bottles.
Ooh, that one's got some kick to it. I like it. It's very different from the first. Very different.
So this one is 100 proof because it's bottled in bond, which is a specific designation by law. Has to be aged in federally bonded warehouses. It's a whole thing that was originally founded in 1897 and is still on the books to this day. Can be
the federal or state law?
Federal.
Federal. Okay.
So bottled and bond spirits can be produced anywhere in the United States, but they have to be aged in a barrel for at least 4 years old. Can't be any younger, and have to be exactly 100 proof. So,
gotcha. This one's good. I like it.
Yeah, McKenna is one of my favorite bourbons. back in the day, it used to be a $30 bottle. Then it hit some popularity, and now it's at about 65 to 70, unfortunately.
Damn.
So had quite the spike.
I can see why. It's good.
Years. Yeah. There's a spirits writer, spirits author. His name's Fred Minnick, who is widely regarded for his opinions, and he was at a spirits competition where I think this took Best in Show, and because it took Best in Show, and he was a part of that panel, it flew off the shelves, and it's it's never been the same since, unfortunately. But anyway, very, very good. Still one of those that I have to try to keep around for the most part. I want to talk too about bourbon and Appalachia, because bourbon is like inherently an Appalachian product. I mean, it was created in the Kentucky region. Bourbon country, of course, is in Appalachia. But it really is interesting to me that there is not more advocacy for Appalachia within the bourbon community or the bourbon industry at large, right? Like, there are some distilleries in West Virginia. There's some distilleries even in Chattanooga too. There's the Chattanooga Whiskey Company, right? Which makes fine products too. But I feel like, personally, and this is, not to say that big business needs to, do more for the little guy. They do. But I'm not going to sit here and say we should, really harp on corporate overlords. But there is an inherent feeling of community within bourbon drinkers, right? And it begs to be consumed with other people, right? Where could you see bourbon and the inherent history of Appalachia being used more to share that advocacy and elevate Appalachian people?
That's an interesting question. I think so. One of the problems is that I don't think that people who live in Appalachia don't all universally identify with the region itself. Like, when I was growing up, I never referred to myself as Appalachian. I was always West Virginian, and I just it wasn't something I ever really thought about. But I do think that there's some value in having cultural unity. And I think that part of that comes from realizing that, someone in Eastern Kentucky is not all that different from somebody from Western North Carolina, despite our collective state prides. And that I think there's some shared struggle and sacrifice there. I mean, the cultural history of our region has been like people who are tough and resilient. And I don't necessarily like the word resilient, because I think we shouldn't have to be resilient is the thing, but there is some real like history there with like people who are more like outlaws, like with bootleggers and things like that. And it's a really cool cultural history that the region has. And I think that there's some shared bonds around that type of stuff. And bourbon is a huge source of pride for Kentucky, as it should be. And I think that the thing that makes Kentucky and makes bourbon unique about that is something that's very similar to how Appalachia is unique. It's one of the most unique regions in the country. It spans, like, depending on how you define it, because there's a federal definition and then there are ranges of cultural definitions, but it's a 13th state region that goes clear from upstate New York to the banks of the Mississippi Delta. And so there's not going to be a lot of things that people in those two very different parts of the region have in common with each other. But I think that no matter what, everybody in Appalachia has experienced some type of hardship, and no matter what, where you live there, you have been disregarded by people in power. That is a universal truth throughout the entire region. And I think that I don't know exactly, because I don't know a lot about the bourbon industry and just like the history behind it, but I think that there's such strong cultural ties to it that there can be common bonds and commonalities formed between people that may not have that history or interest to them, but that it's an inherently Appalachian thing. Because I think a lot of people, even if they're not even familiar with like bootlegging, moonshining, stuff like that, have like some identity towards that simply by being from especially the central Appalachian region, and understanding that so many of our ancestors had to get by making things out on their own, whether it be, like whiskey, or whether it be having to like survive in a coal mine, or having to put together a business from scratch, like a general store, like my great grandfather did. He came from Syria in the 1900s, and it was actually during Prohibition when he started a general store in Corra, West Virginia, and according to family lore, did have a somewhat of a speakeasy operation there, and that he hid like jars of whiskey in the floorboards and in the walls of his store. Now, I can't confirm that, but that's what's been told. And there were some diary entries that I found that back that up. But I think that I think it's just like it's associating it with the culture. And I think that that's something that's really important, because the more that people become familiar with Appalachia as not a monolith, I think the more that there's a developed interest in the culture. And I think that's how you can really advocate for a region, because just like I mentioned with the Mine Wars Museum, you have a lot of people that maybe like they're from parts of the country where they aren't familiar with Appalachia, but they're like, they're like leftists or progressives. And they're like, well, what do I have in common with this part of the country? Like they're just a bunch of red right wingers or whatever. It's like, no, the foundation of labor rights existed because of this state and because of the people in it, and because like they were fed up with people taking advantage of them. And I imagine, especially with like small batch whiskey makers and bourbon makers, there's a similarity there with just how they feel about, corporate consolidation and the spirits and beverage industry and things like that. I think there's a lot that can be drawn in a lot of through lines. And I think the biggest answer to that, though, is that there's a cultural commonality within all of it.
Well, I mean, it's not an uncommon thing still, of course, to hear people complain about, even at these distilleries where, we hold some of them in such high regard for the products that they make, of course, but there are still workers there who are actually, producing them, and it's, not the master distillers, right? It's not the master tasters, and they are still having to go to the distillery in negative 10-degree temperatures or right after there's a major flood, and their safety is not being cared for. And there is, in and of itself, advocacy for workers' rights, for, them to unionize as well. And I mean, I hear from workers at distilleries saying, we feel like we're not taken care of, like we're not, being advocated for. And I agree with you. I think that there's, room for, organization. It's a problem that still runs very deep, across all, all workers.
Yeah, I think there's a really powerful storytelling component there of like what you get on the shelf at your liquor store or whatever. Like there's a whole series of processes that go into that, and there are workers who, just like people are getting taken advantage of by their employer, or they're extracting wealth from their labor. But the story is the people who are putting that together, who are making that happen, like the people the Maker's Mark facility is still hand dip the wax to seal the bottles, and I believe that's still the case that they're hand dipped themselves. I think
it is. Yeah.
Because that was a whole trade dress issue at one point. In law school.
Oh, they still sue people to death for.
Oh yeah.
If they come out with a wax that has a little bit of drippage on it, I mean, you can expect the maximum litigation for any type of wax drippage on your bottle, and God forbid that it's even a shade of red. I mean, you will. You might lose your house and your dog and everything, if you're not ready to lawyer up. But
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. This is a slightly off topic, but I mean, it's unfortunate that we have this kind of rose-colored glasses view of the bourbon industry at times, where we think, oh, it's not like other industries. It's very much like other industries.
Yeah.
I mean, they're still trying to, make money in the same way that, Target is.
Workers are going to get taken advantage of anywhere when there's a profit motive. And
absolutely.
I think, though, it gives the opportunity for those workers to really have some power in organization, like with unions, because, you don't get your Maker's Mark bottle dipped without the labor of workers. It's not the CEO or the master distiller, whoever is dipping those bottles, or that's bottling, or that's running the assembly lines, running the factory lines, making sure things get, packaged, shipped, and everything, the logistics. It's people that are probably hourly wage workers that are doing that. And I think that that's something that is really easy to forget about when you just pick up a bottle off a shelf and pay for it and take it home. I think that, but I think with the advent of social media and everything, and how like organizations like More Perfect Union that are doing really compelling storytelling from workers' perspectives, I think that that's something that really is a powerful form of advocacy, because it is an industry that you can very easily look at it with rose-colored glasses. But with a lot of these industries, you peek behind the curtain and you see the real problems.
Let's stay focused here on the industry for just a second as well, because another friend of mine, Logan, I also asked him to send me a little bit of questions for you. He actually works in the industry as well. He has a brand called the Bond Bourbon that he founded with some friends from college. And he is actually an Appalachian resident, was born and raised in Appalachia. But he chose to, relocate to South Central Kentucky to work in the bourbon industry. And he specifically pointed out that he wanted to see distilleries expand into the area. And he said most Appalachians have a great sense of pride in and encourage the protection of our region, which in the past has been burnt by some uncaring corporations and empty promises. Despite this skepticism, do you think that there is interest in or a demand for continued growth of the corporate bourbon industry in this region? And he said, I know Dueling Barrels, Poly Hollow, 1620, Eastern Light, Kentucky Mist, and a few others are present / have plans to build in the area.
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but I think that with big corporations, or even, medium size, whatever you want to call them, I think that what's important is, like we talked about, worker rights and fairness. And so with some of those industries, like, it's great to see like mom and pop companies pop up. And that's obviously extremely difficult with something like that. Because I can't imagine that running a distillery is cheap. I'm sure it's not. And it requires a lot of like permits and all that jazz. But I think that, I don't know that there's necessarily a desire to see corporate growth, but I do think there's probably a desire to see an industry thrive with that treats its workers well. And I think that's really what, from people that I talk to, that's the thing they care about the most. And when you have a company that lives by those values, I think you see a huge difference. Like, for example, like this is not like the greatest example, but this is just one I'm thinking of. There's a coffee company based in Floyd, Virginia, in Appalachian, Virginia, that like their whole thing is like, we want to treat our workers well. They're not big enough to where it's like makes sense for them to unionize, but they offer like paid family leave. They offer living wages. Like that's a core component of their company. And as they grow, that's a way that they market themselves to potential employees, to people that would work there. And for a place like Floyd, Virginia, to be paid a living wage in Floyd, to have on-site daycare premises, which is, I believe, what this company has, those are big deals. And I think that if you see more companies start to embrace things that really value employees, I think that's where you would see an interest in growth of even like a corporate entity. I think what people don't like is corporate consolidation, where they just see these big companies like an Anheuser-Busch, for example. We want to bring in like an alcohol example of like just gobbling up different companies, like buying them up, like a Goosehead or Goose Island or whatever that beer company is in Chicago, like buying up companies like that, like Sierra Nevada, and then like, consolidating, cutting jobs and running them like a cutthroat corporation. I think we've seen this even with companies like a recent example would be AT&T, not related to alcohol, but just like a massive company that they got a new CEO in a couple of years ago, and he's making everybody do a return to office. And it's like, if this doesn't suit you, then you can quit. This thing where it's like it disregards the employees and just puts profit and quote unquote innovation, which is a bullshit word made up in corporate America by chambers of commerce, is a reason to just cut employees and invest at the top and invest in shareholder returns. So I think what matters is to people mostly is not necessarily whether it's like a larger corporate interest. I think what matters is how they, like, what their values are they lead with. And part of that always comes down to the employees, to the workers, because they're the ones that bring the actual value to a company. Yeah. Like C-suite does not bring value to the company. They're people that are charged to make money. That's what they do. And that's what they're supposed to do. And so I think the most important thing is those values. And for companies that do have that, I think that they will be rewarded by more people becoming loyal to their brand. Like if there was a brand of bourbon, for example, that was like, we're unionized, we're proud of that, we voluntarily recognize our employees' unions, we pay them living wages, we offer them generous benefits. Like genuinely, that is something where I would be a committed person to that brand, because I knew they were taking care of their people.
Yeah. There's another half of this question too, and I think it ties pretty well into what you're talking about too, is other kind of like infrastructure challenges that you might see being encountered with the growth of the industry, specifically in Appalachia, because Logan's talking about like, a lot of water sources, roads, broadband are lacking in Appalachia. And, do you think like something like a Buffalo Trace size distillery could be handled, that kind of like corporation, even if it is, with, outside of the corporate consolidation aspect of it? Do you think that could be handled in the region too?
That's a tough question to answer, because I know there's been a lot more.
It's not a monolithic question for sure.
Sure. Well, I know there's been like a lot more federal investment in things like broadband and stuff, but I don't know how well that's fully been deployed as of late. I know there's still a lot of work to do. And I do think that that's a prohibitive factor for, just looking outside the bourbon industry, just like other companies with wanting to, invest in the region. Like I'll use West Virginia, for example. West Virginia is not an attractive place to cite jobs, because it's a very difficult state generally just to travel to and within. It's hard to like if you wanted to fly there, it's difficult. There's not a lot of great airport coverage. You always have to catch a connector in like Charlotte or somewhere. The roads are difficult because there's not a lot of major highways that service the state. And it actually takes quite a while to get from one place to another there, even though it's a small state. So I think that it's a real concern, and it's been a concern for a long time. That's the whole reason why the Appalachian Regional Commission exists. That's the reason why things like the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, exists, because the region was so far behind, and is to a little bit lesser extent so far behind the rest of the country when it comes to things like infrastructure, things that make quality of life higher. And I mean, I think something like a Buffalo Trace, like, they could bring in other investment, I think, depending on like where they, like, if they wanted to make a large like operation in some other part of Eastern Kentucky, or I don't think, well, they wouldn't obviously go outside of Eastern Kentucky, but some other part of Eastern Kentucky that's like less developed, or less, more rural, more remote, I guess you could say, like a Martin County or something like that. I mean, it would be difficult. Obviously, it would cost them more money, and I think that they were like, depending on how they do it responsibly, like, there's obviously backlash from people who, because like if you have to buy up land and build a facility, that takes away from like the natural surroundings and stuff like that. But I do think that there's some value to that, because if if you have a region in the state that's like, well, Buffalo Trace's main wholesale distribution, or like their bottling and their distilling occurs here, like that could be a reason for other companies to invest there. You just always have like the balance of anything like that, with balancing it with what the needs are of the community. And I think that's where a lot of things, especially in urban areas, get lost. Nashville being a perfect example, where the city's government way over invested in like tourism and hospitality, and it has really hurt the community itself. And so I think you have to be really concerned about stuff like that when it comes to that. But as far as like, I worry that the region is going to be left further behind because of these lack of investments. And I mean, I think we narrowly avoided the entire Appalachian Regional Commission from getting defunded, which is what the White House's budget wanted to do earlier this year. And I think that they've since line item that out of it, but that would have taken, hundreds of millions of dollars out of the region at a time when it desperately needs it. I mean, this is a region in the country that, for a long time, like, many people didn't have running water in their houses and didn't have indoor plumbing. And before the TVA, only 1 in 10 households had electricity in their house. That was around the New Deal time. So there's just so much where the region has still been so far left behind. But I think that the bourbon industry can play a really important role. It's about how they integrate within different communities, because I think that they're probably, and I can't speak to this personally because I'm not from Kentucky, but I do think that there's a lot of Kentuckians who have a lot of pride in that industry and are really proud that like it is unique to the state. It is something that is universally, like, throughout the entire world consumed and appreciated, but it is something that, like, a lot of that only can be made in Kentucky. And that's a really, really important thing to people. And so I think that there's something there with that, but it's just, with anything like that, it's so hard because there's so many different factors that come along with investing further in regions. But I do think that with anything like that, be it the bourbon industry or any other industry, there is a certain level of just modernization that has to happen in Appalachia that has to come from federal and state investment in it. And that there's always going to be growing pains with the local community when it comes to that. And that's just, it's a difficult thing to balance, but it's just a necessary evil. And I think people like Andy Beshear, Governor Beshear, I think he does really understand that. And I think he deserves a lot of credit for using his role as governor to attract a lot of new business investment in the state. I mean, they just recently announced like the largest economic development project in the history of the state of Kentucky, like 2 days ago. It was a battery plant that's going to bring in 5,000 jobs, an insane amount of jobs to the state.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that with anything like that, there's going to be people that don't like it. And there's going to be some issues with like communities, but I don't know if that answered your question or not, but that's the way I view anything like that. Cause I used to work in economic development at a public affairs firm that I worked at. And so there's always these difficult things like plates that you got to spin in order to make it all work out for the people there.
Right. And I think it did. And again, there's always supposed to be this focus on, investing in people more than anything, making sure that they are taken care of before really anything else. And I know that that's a very broad generalization when talking about how you are supposed to operate in some of these smaller communities. But I think that when you are specifically talking about an industry like bourbon, which does have this really like glossy sheen about it that operates on community first and is driven by, we sit around and we pour this bottle together and everything. And you don't like hearing these stories about, well, another distillery closed, or they're going through another bout of litigation or whatever, like it doesn't do a lot of good for people wanting to be invested in the future of the industry itself. And so I think it is important to work from the ground up. And if you invest in the wellness of your workers, of the people who are, going to operate the stills and are going to build the barrels and are going to, help get the product to the shelf at the end of it all, you're going to wind up with a better overall, experience for your consumer too.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Let's move on to our third sample here. We're gonna do the Rare Character Limited release. This was blended by my buddy Chad.
Nice.
Here's the bottle.
I like that bottle.
This is the 6th release from 2025 for this this product. It is 110 proof. It's made with all Kentucky bourbon, all wheated bourbon. So this is going to be sweeter than what we've had previously. And as young as 6 years, and I think it's got some double-digit age product in here too. But overall, I tried to run the gamut of what the experience would be like for just a bourbon tasting for you, Chuck.
Yeah. No, this is cool. This one's really good too. It definitely has a sweeter taste to it for sure, but I like it.
It's all just varying, degrees of what you're gonna get with bourbon experiences. So, like as I said, this has wheated bourbon in it. That means instead of, traditionally bourbon is made with rye in the recipe. They use wheat as the flavoring agent in it.
Mm-hmm.
Maker's Mark made that popular with their bourbon. Chuck, let's move into some fun stuff here, because we've been fairly heavy for most of the episode.
All good.
And my audience is not normally used to politics, I would say, but it's okay. This is different. But they're gonna be all right, I think. This is
we'll hold their hand and walk them through it.
Yeah, exactly. This is a side that they're not used to seeing from me, but what are you gonna do, man? What are you gonna do? When it, it's all. It was gonna happen eventually,
nowadays anyway. So
yeah. So we have a couple of segments on the back half of the podcast. We normally call this one high proof hot takes. I'm going to change it up a little bit though, because there's a song from a new album from a gentleman that we've been talking about, Mr. Tyler Childers, and that song is called Bitin' List. Which has been a fun little social media trend where people have been calling out folks or movements or things that have been rubbing them the wrong way. And you had a fun little post on the Appodlachia social media where you asked people to share their who was on their biting list recently. So I'm going to ask you, Chuck, who's on your biting list right now?
Oh man, that's a long list. Well, I mean, I think pretty much every thing that I posted from that, because I shared people's answers on Instagram, and like almost every one of those is on mine. I mean, so I'll start with JD Vance because he's always on my list. I think that he's an objectively terrible person, and I think that he has sold his soul multiple times and is just carrying water for a fascist administration right now, and has made a fool of himself. And many people consider him to be Appalachian, even though he isn't. But I think that that's a real shame because they're seeing one of our worst, if we want to call it that. I would say too is squishy Democrats who don't actually have any real values or policy views. They're in it just for themselves. There's a lot of them right now. Like Chuck Schumer is one of them. Yeah. Hakeem Jeffries is one of them. There's so many that just are cowards. And I think that that's part of the reason why we're in the situation that we're in. I'll even say Kamala Harris is another one of those who is just, I think she
didn't turn on the news for 6 months.
Yeah. Going on a book tour, I guess, talking about her presidential campaign that was a losing one. And look, she was dealt a bad hand. I'll give her that, because Joe Biden was, he's very culpable for what happened. But I think that, when you run a campaign where you don't differentiate yourself from Joe Biden and you refuse to, for example, let even a Palestinian woman speak at the DNC, there's some self-inflicted wounds there. So I would say a lot of squishy Democrats are like that. I would say a big one on my list, Benjamin Netanyahu, is on my biting list, because I think that he is, one of the worst human beings on the face of the planet right now. He's a war criminal, and I think a terrorist. So, I mean, those are big ones. Obviously, Donald Trump, he's always up there. Trying to think of like outside of a political perspective.
Man, we're just going down the line.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. It's terrible. I've got so many. I think people that listen to music out loud in public spaces too. That's a non-political one. That just annoys the hell out of me. So dude, I'll end on a non-political one.
I was at the gym this morning and I was getting my hoodie out of the locker, and there was a guy who had like a speaker, not his phone, like a speaker. And it wasn't large, but apparently it was large enough to go above like the permissible decibel level. And he was playing, I couldn't even identify the bad country music that was coming out of it. But just, why do you need to do that? Why?
I can't stand that kind of stuff, man. That drives me so crazy.
It's insane.
So people just don't understand, how to act like an adult.
Yeah. I have never said this on the podcast before, but free Palestine.
Yeah.
It's the official stance of this show. I think
it has broken people's brains over the past, ever since October 7th, 2023, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why a former co-host on my show, not John, but the other co-host I had, is no longer with our show, because we had a fundamentally different view on that. And I don't want to go into detail any more than that. Sure. But it just that's why she's no longer with the show, because I think it's a moral litmus test right now. And it was something where I didn't know a lot about that issue, truthfully, before October 7th, because it's just something that was never on my radar, despite being a quarter Syrian and having like a Syrian grandfather and all that. I didn't really know much about it. And, the more you realize that there was so much of a propaganda effort throughout the United States to convince us to be on the side of Israel, it's pretty wild to me just how much effort was put into that. And you start to peel back the layers of the onion and realize that, like, it is an absolute, just ungodly, unjust, unlawful tragedy and genocide that's happening there. And it really is just so disheartening that the United States is one of, it with the power that we have, is doing nothing about it, and is in fact not just doing nothing, is enabling it to happen. And I mean, this is something where the United States could put an end to this, because we have that type of power with Israel. We are responsible for Israel existing. Yeah, one phone call. And it's just it's a shame, and it's really sad. And that's why, like, I try to speak out as much as I can in different ways using the platform that I have. When things first started, and that's not even really, things have been going on for a long time, but let's say post October 7th, I didn't really know what my role in that would be. I didn't know if it made sense, because I'm like, how does this relate to Appalachia? And what I realized over time is, like, it doesn't matter if it relates to Appalachia or not. First of all, it impacts all of us because we're all American taxpayers. But it's something where, like, every voice matters with pushing back against what is happening. Yep. And we've seen this. We've started to see the cracks in the facade, and they're little cracks, but the cracks matter. And the more that we push, the more that we all collectively have an opportunity to save people's lives. And right now it is heartbreaking to see what is happening there. And I hate that, like, it's part of, like, it's all over my social media feeds now, but I'm like, it kind of needs to be, because I need to be reminded of what is happening, because I feel like what little platform I have, which, I've built it to be at least a modest size for, Instagram or whatever, it's important to use that to try to educate people on what is actually happening, because it was horrifying to me to realize that I hate to use the word victim, because I feel like that's not the right word, but subjected to propaganda, and had a belief. Like, I've always felt really strongly about Palestinian emancipation. But just, like, the extent to which, like, Israel was causing so much harm, I never really understood. And you like have all this propaganda that's convincing you of something else. And it was horrifying to me to really have my eyes open. And I credit, like, several of my friends that were more informed about the situation than I, of, like, helping me understand, like, here's what the reality is. And then, like, following different people who have been following this conflict for a very long time. I don't like to use the word conflict, but it's, if in the collective, it's harder to really define. I mean, obviously it's
the easiest colloquial term to use,
right?
Because there's so many people who are, debating over the use of the term apartheid or the use of the term genocide, or, even trying to call it a Holocaust. And it doesn't, people can argue over it one way or another. If it's reductive to say, conflict, of course, but however you want to define it, it doesn't really matter.
And it's hard to define over the broad expanse of history too, because it's not always been amounted to what is a genocide now. And
exactly.
I think Israel's government runs an apartheid government, but I don't know how much it's always been that way. But it is just, like, it's an atrocity that the international community should be united against. And we'd like to think that that was the case, because everybody looks back at World War II and thinks, yeah, I'd be against the Nazis. But what we don't stand to consider is, like, how much of, like, how complicit world leaders can be in something so terrible, and how much propaganda that has been implemented over time can impact people. And I think it's really scary to think about that. But I think the more that we can talk about it and help people understand what's really happening, and also help people understand that, like, we as American taxpayers, like, this does affect us because our money is funding this. And so I don't know, that's where I've laid on this. I never thought that it would ever be an issue that I would be even involved with, but it just is, it's something that's so clear to me, and it's so horrifying that like I think that everybody should be using their voice to speak out, and there has been a lot of that, and I think it's really admirable the people that have like Miss Rachel has been one of the greatest ambassadors to a free Palestine that I think we've seen in our modern era, and I think that she's a beacon of light and hope in a very dark time.
And it's something that I feel like we shouldn't have to bash people's heads in with simple rhetoric over, because never again shouldn't mean never again just for one people. Being anti-genocide, Holocaust shouldn't be equated with anti-Semitism, because that's by no means what this is. It's advocating for literally just people being given the right to exist and live. There are Christian Palestinians just as much as there are Muslim Palestinians, and they have been targeted as indiscriminately by American bombs throughout the course of the past 2 years. Just as, gay and straight Palestinians have been as well. They don't get targeted for their sexuality by these bombs. So whatever rhetoric has been fed is unfortunate, and I hope that it can be unlearned over the next very quickly. I would say, but
yeah,
it's been a very enlightening couple of years, I would say.
It definitely has, and like I've learned a lot about it. I know that people have opinions of this guy, but I watched Hassan Piker's stream fairly regularly because I think that he does have a pretty sophisticated view of what's happening, and I know that people have opinions on him, and it's fine, whatever. But I think that I like to do research outside of that, but I've learned so much about like the history of Israel and Palestine through watching that, through reading several books. Like I spent, after the whole thing that happened on my coast, like I spent a lot of time the past year and a half trying to really learn as much as I could about it, because what I didn't realize at the time is like my family's history is closely tied to that region. Like what I didn't realize until relatively recently, like you hear the term of the region, the Golan Heights region, referred to a lot with Israel and Palestine, and specifically with Israel. What I didn't know is that that's actually part of Syria. And Syria is where my family is from. And that's like an occupied part of Syria from Israel. And I'm like, I did not realize just how close like my lineage is even linked to this. It didn't even occur to me. Like, and so I think that really took me, I'm not saying that like any of this is related to my family specifically, but just the historical aspect of it, and how like I really don't know a lot about, that part of the world and my family's history and everything. And so I think it took on a little bit slightly more of a personal aspect to me because of that. And because like I've always wanted to know more about my family's history in Syria, and how Syria's history is very closely intertwined with Israel and Palestine. And it's something that is just, it's really unsettling. And you see a lot of like Islamophobia that's come out of this now too. And of course, a lot of anti-Semitism. And I think that's an important thing to really separate from being, anti-genocide. And I don't think that there's been a lot of great effort to do it. And I think that there's a lot of bad actors who want to intertwine the two things in support of what Israel is doing. But yeah, I don't know. That's where I land on everything. And it's good that like more people are coming around to that. And I think that my view is like, it doesn't matter how long it took you to get there. It just matters that you get there as soon as possible and create a critical mass of public outcry against this. I think that that's really what I've learned and understood, that is, part of my duty with the platform that I have. And I know that I haven't always done a good job with it, but I hope to do better in the future.
Let's move on to our last sample as well, so we can get into the last segment of the show too.
Sounds good.
This is the last fun thing we do before we get out of here. It's called Tips and Bits. It's where we recommend things that we have been watching, reading, listening to, just enjoying, that we also want people to check out. Not that we haven't done a lot of recommendations here recently, but it can be literally anything, a movie, video games, books, something like that. So Chuck, what do you have to recommend to people?
Oh man. So, okay. It's a great thing. I'm trying to remember now. Oh my God. So I'm reading a book, but now I can't, I'm blanking on what the freaking title of it is. It's terrible. Cause I just started, reading it when I was oh my God, I need to look it up real quick. Snow Crash, that's what it is. All right, sorry. So first of all, I started reading this book when I was in New Orleans a couple weeks ago for a work, or actually for a podcast thing, and I wanted to get more into cyberpunk novels, so I started reading. I got these recommendations from somebody, and there's a book called Snow Crash, which is really interesting and really good. I really like it so far. Speaking of cyberpunk, a great game, one of my favorites, Cyberpunk 2077. I'm a big fan of RPG sort of open world games, ones that are very massively expanded open world games like Elder Scrolls, Fallout. Fallout is my all-time favorite video game franchise, and I love it. And the new Fallout, the new season of the show's coming out in December, and I'm super hyped about that. Yeah. So I love this show. I thought it was fantastic the first season, so I highly recommend that. It's on Amazon. Ella Purnell is God, she's perfect for that role, and I love Walton Goggins. He's amazing.
He's awesome.
He truly is one of the best actors of our time. Those are two things I'm really into right now. Let me think. As far as other things I've watched, I really listen to. I mean, Tyler Childers has his new album out, which I'm in love with. Snipe Hunter is amazing. Hell yeah! Oh, I didn't even notice that back there. That's awesome.
It's been sitting back there the whole time.
Yeah, it's been I just blended in with the rest. That's cool. I love it. I love Snipe Hunter. It's my favorite of his albums. Good. I'm excited because Margot Price has a new album coming out at the end of the month, and I'm a humongous fan of her.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it comes out the 29th. I'm really excited about it. And Molly Tuttle also has a new album that she just released, and she's a great bluegrass musician, one of the best in the game right now. So I love all of that. A lot of good music happening. As far as video games, so I've been my three favorite franchises I think of all time are, like I mentioned, Fallout. I'm obsessed with it. I wish that they would get Fallout 5 closer. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Who knows? The Elder Scrolls, which again, who knows if we're ever going to get anything past Skyrim, but and Zelda. And I'm a huge fan of Tears of the Kingdom. I recently picked up my Switch again and started playing it again. And it's just it's such a beautiful game, and I just love everything about it. And so because of that, I've been getting more into different Japanese stuff because of that. I started watching more Studio Ghibli, or I don't even know how to say it, but Animation Studios movies, and I've really enjoyed a lot of them. Spirited Away, which is one of their most famous. It's an excellent movie. I absolutely love it. And we also watch From Up on Poppy Hill and My Neighbor Totoro, which are all really great. So I definitely recommend those. And I mean, I think that's all that I've been working on lately. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I love it. I still I recommended it last week, but I cannot stop thinking about how much I loved Superman. I just absolutely.
I haven't seen it. I've heard it's good.
Oh, it's so good, man. I really, really loved it. It is just. I keep coming back to it and just being excited for what is like the best representation of who he is as a character. And, you know, I said this last week, but like, it's not the best Superman movie or even really the best superhero movie, but it's just nice to have, you know, him well represented for the first time in a long time. It feels like I was not the biggest fan of Henry Cavill as Superman, but what are you gonna do?
I keep hearing such good things about it. I feel like I need to see it. Is it still in theaters?
I think so, but it also just came out on digital as well.
Oh, okay. Because I'm like my wife and I are old school, and we still love going to movie theaters when we can.
I prefer it. I definitely prefer it. But
there's an indie theater in Nashville called the Belcourt, and when we lived there, we'd go there. We were actually members of it.
Yeah,
we'd go there all the time, and I love going and seeing movies. So I don't know. It's a thing that we've always done.
I played at when I was in this one particular band. I played at Belcourt Taps way back in the day. I loved Belcourt Taps. But anyway, way off topic. Let's try our last little sample here, and then I'll let you go so you can finish.
Sounds good.
Your work day.
Yeah, I've got to get something out before 5. So, but no, this has been fun. I love this conversation. It's been really great.
Yeah, man. So this is a limited edition release from Jefferson's Reserve. They are, again, a Kentucky company. They source all of their stuff right now. This is a blend of Heaven Hill, Wild Turkey, and Barton bourbons. It is cask strength at 130 proof. It's so quite a jump up from where we've been. So drink as much or as little as you like.
Wow. That is
very
impressive.
full-bodied. Yeah. Now, I'm a high-proof bourbon drinker, so this is more in my wheelhouse than the other 3 samples. But that being said, though, all the other 3 are still, you know, they're still very good. But I wanted to give you an idea of something that's more, you know, on like regular rotation for me, but is also, you know, a good representation as well of how even though you have products from different regions of Kentucky, they can still be blended together into one cohesive product too. But what I have to ask, if you had a favorite of all the samples, what would you pick?
I would say probably the McKenna. I think that one was really good. I liked it.
Yeah.
It was smooth. I liked all of them. They were all great choices. But I do think if I had to pick one, it'd be the McKenna for sure.
I'm not entirely surprised by that. That doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah.
But, Chuck, thank you so much for this, man. This has been really fun. This has been really different for TIMBP. But I really do appreciate you, man, for everything. Where can people find you on social media? Where can people find the podcast? I'm going to let you have it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. I really appreciate you sending me all the bourbon. This has been really cool. I love that. And it's been a great conversation. You can find me anywhere on social media or on anywhere you listen to your podcast. Just everything. All of our handles are at Appodlachia, Appodlachia. And that's the easiest way to find me.
There you go. And as always, you can find the show at My Bourbon Pod. You can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/MyBourbonPodcast for as little as $1 a month. You can also find all of our apparel and merchandise at bourbonshop.threadless.com. You can leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app of choice. And that does it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much. See you next time. Until then, I'm Perry. Oh, he's not going to do it. That's all right.
Oh, sorry. My bad. My name's Chuck. I wasn't sure.
No, I'm leaving it all in, too. And this is My Bourbon Podcast.
Perfect. Love it.